Hey everyone, we are so excited to have our expert guest speaker, Leanna Winberg, here. She is an integrative energy healer. We're going to be talking about the energy field, astrology, and all the things today. It's going to be an amazing conversation. Leanna, thank you so much for joining us. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do and who you work with?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So, what I do is called Advanced Integrative Energy Healing. It's a whole person modality that looks at the energy field as the foundation of all types of health and well-being. It acknowledges that a human being is both a spirit in a human body, and that all parts of us need to be working in coherence in order for us to live a life that feels whole and fulfilling, and for us to walk through the world in a way that feels aligned. It's essentially learning how to bring our soul essence forward into our human life and moving through the world with a sense of fulfillment, connection to all things around us, and ideally a sense of service. The way that energy healing works is a lot of people come to this work after they've been disillusioned by the medical system or the medical model, especially like allopathic medicine, going to see different types of allopathic doctors or specialists or different types of talk therapy.
Mhm.
Those things are really incredible for things like broken bones or having surgeries. But when we look at whole person wellness, a lot of those systems have been built on this Western system that doesn't acknowledge the spirit or the essence of a person. And when we start to move through trauma, illness, challenges that come up in our life without identifying the part of us that doesn't feel fulfilled, the part of our spirit or our emotional body that isn't being attended to in those settings, it tends to actually compound things and further repress things and make things more challenging. So the people that come to energy healing work are people who have had or experienced challenges and that they know the treatment that they're getting or the work they're doing on themselves is not really getting to the core of what the issue is. People usually have a really strong intuitive guidance system internally that tells them what they need to know, even if they don't know the exact cause. They can often go through spaces in the Western medical system and just feel that the treatment that they're getting is not really getting to the depth that they need. So, energy healing works with energy is the foundation of all things and the different layers in the energy field. So, when we work with an energy healer, that person is looking to you as a whole holistic system and is both listening for what you're saying verbally, subconsciously, saying through the language of the body, but also listening to and seeing the way energy wants to move through your energy field and body, and inviting the client into their own awareness of all of those things. What's most important about energy healing, it's a consciousness-based modality, which means that it works with what's emerging in a person moment to moment. And that it's so important when you see an energy healer that it's client centered and that there's always a deferring to the client as the one that knows best about what's going on for them, even if they don't have the language. So it's super important for a practitioner, though we have a lot of experience, to not say what's happening with the client, but rather to ask questions and to facilitate the space where people can become aware of what's going on for them.
Wow. That was a lot. I have a ton of questions. Okay, so something that you said before we hit record that I want to go back to is the energy field. And I shared with you that I believe that, repressed emotions or suppressed trauma or things like that definitely can manifest as disease in the physical body. And you said it's in the energy field before it's ever in the body. So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So in energy healing, we talk a lot about the different bodies, and maybe people have heard of this concept or maybe not. Like the easiest thing that maybe people have heard about is when we go to sleep and we dream, our astral body has a different sort of energy than the physical body, and that's the part of us that goes off to dream. So we acknowledge that there's different vibrational parts of our bodies that we call separate bodies, and they have corresponding densities. And that essentially means that the physical body is the most dense of all of the different parts of us. If we were like a jawbreaker or a concentric egg with different sort of levels to us, the physical is the most dense, followed by the emotional, followed by the mental, followed by the spiritual, and then it goes on and on and on. And so when we look at the physical body, energy always starts as subtle energy, so fine vibration, if we were to think about it. I love describing this in terms of like the spectrum of color. So purple, if you were to measure it, would vibrate way faster than red, right? So they're both colors, but they have different frequencies in the same way you tune into radio station 89.2 versus 102.5. Both radio stations, but they're at different frequencies if you were to measure it in terms of radio waves. I'm getting to the point, but
Oh,
essentially,
good.
energy starts as subtle, it starts as fine vibration, and over time, it condenses into matter. So everything starts first as a spirit, as an essence. It comes down into a thought or a belief system. It eventually comes into an emotion, and then it condenses into the body. So if something like disease shows up in the body, it first was a concept, then it was an idea or a belief system, then it was a feeling, then it lands in the body. So there's been studies that show that some cancers can actually be found in the energy field like decades before they actually show up in the body, which is why at least the type of energy healing I've studied was founded by a collective of nurses who had the intention that this type of work would be preventative medicine and ideally would be used in hospital settings or other type of settings, because things can be identified and treated energetically before they land in the body, where you just have to use different techniques and strategies to work with them because now they're in dense
Hmm.
material form.
Wow. I don't know. Are you familiar with Gabor Mate? Are you familiar with his work? Like, I have that book, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Cost of Stress. And he kind of identifies like the personality types that end up with different diseases. So you saying like some of those beliefs and emotions, and how have you seen that contribute to physical disease in the people that you work with?
Yeah, tons. A lot of people come in with different presentations, and usually the presentations is just energy not moving in a way that's ideal for that person. So it actually creates a lot of disease, a lot of stress, a lot of that feeling of depression, anxiety, panic, splitting, when energy is not moving through our system in a way that our soul or our spirit wants it to. So actually, it's the force of repression of energy movement that creates sort of the condensation of energy, which manifests as different sort of diseases. Obviously, like we can't ignore epigenetics or like
Right.
the physical history of how energy
Hmm.
manifests, but there's always usually similarities in terms of a person's energetic structure and if things manifest as more of sort of like a depressive quality versus an anxious quality. Um, but it all comes back to energy not moving ideally through the body. And this can oftentimes be like established in early childhood, like how were the
Hmm.
connections with parents, how were the boundaries, were you taking in a lot of information and didn't have an outlet to understand or process it? Did you have to defend yourself against certain energy? It's essentially like so complex to understand. I don't even fully understand how certain patterns manifest, but there's definitely notable types. And you can see that in the way people carry themselves in their life too. So there's like a whole system of body reading too, which shows like you can look at someone's posture and identify trauma based on how someone literally walks or holds themselves through the world. But that's essentially you're looking at the energetic template that has manifested into the body, and you can deduce what type of trauma a person has experienced based on how they hold themselves now.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
so interesting because I use, and I think we've talked about this before, like positive intelligence, like the saboteur, the programming. I use that assessment with my clients, and I've kind of discovered like these patterns within. Like a pleaser is someone who always pleased a parent. Someone who's hyper vigilant is always someone who has had abuse as a child, like emotional, physical, sexual abuse. And there's other ones that I've kind of like made these connections, but it's so interesting because a lot of these things do relate back to childhood. That's when we form our belief system, right? And we're not questioning like, is this actually true? We believe it to be the truth because we've been so conditioned. We attach on to like experiences, things we see and hear and feel. And all the things. So it is kind of mind blowing. So
Absolutely.
when you work with people, is this like, can you do it distance, or is this like a hands-on thing, or can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can work with people with energy healing work because energy is not bound by time and space. It's non-local. So you can even work with someone's energy field when they're not present with you in the space or on a call. You actually don't need any connection with the person. You just need consent, which is so
Mhm.
important when
Right.
we look at energy. Like you definitely should not be tapping into anyone's energy field without consent. But saying that, the ways that I work with people primarily are in person and over Zoom.
Hmm.
There's a nervous system regulation quality that is kind of akin to certain types of therapy where it's super important to stay in a co-regulated state. So through energy healing, there is a therapeutic quality where through working with the body and highlighting or energizing the unconscious things in the energy field, it's natural and typical and actually ideal that people come a little bit out of their, what we would call like the window of tolerance, their nervous system's ability to hold the information that they're with. And it's super important to stay in connection with somebody else as they're going through that work by regulating the nervous system so that what's coming up they can both understand and integrate. So when I work over Zoom, there's always a component at the beginning of the session that looks a lot like sort of identifying the current challenges, locating it in the body, learning how to hold our awareness on what's showing up in the body because the body holds so much of that unconscious information. And then once we've sort of identified an intention behind the work, then with permission, we access the energy field. In person, that is me feeling with my hands, seeing with my clairvoyant sight, or hearing with my clairaudience the information in the energy field. But at a distance, you can do it. It's just called holographically. So essentially, I can feel, visualize, and see the energy field still, even though we're not in the same physical space, because energy is not bound by physical space. So it's it's a different experience in person versus online, but the
Hmm.
efficacy is the same.
I'm mind blown right now. I was like, I mean, I know you're super intuitive, but so you can actually see and hear things.
If the field wants me to. So
Yeah.
that's like where it always comes back to the like concept of it being a consciousness-based modality. So essentially I described it yesterday in this super funny way. But like the energy field is like a puppy and I'm like a dog walker. So like I'm there to follow the puppy on its exploration, but I'm also there to make sure it stays safe and to get curious and to ask questions and to re-guide, if we're going
Yeah. Redirect.
off track. But it's really like I'm the support, I'm the guide, and I trust that the energy field of the person is going to show me the most important thing to work with that day. So sometimes it's very body based, it's learning how to hold our awareness on a point of pain, which is really challenging to do on our own, like because the mind will want to distract or
Yeah.
avoid, and all these things happen below sort of the level of our awareness. So it's really hard to kind of hold presence in a space of pain.
Hmm.
And sometimes it gets super multidimensional and we are moving through different vibrational levels if that's where the source of this person's challenge is, if it's from a different time or a different life, or if it goes back to childhood, then the field will show me or give me some indication of to what to bring up to bring this into someone's present awareness, because really I can go in and make shifts and things, and yes, that helps, but for the person to become aware of what's going on is the most empowering thing, because they're the ones that are going to have to continue to work with it as it shifts and changes and they learn how to orient their life around the differences now.
Wow. So you must see some pretty shocking stuff, hear some pretty shocking things. I mean, you don't obviously, like, you want to keep your patients confidentiality, but has there been things that really surprised you? Or are you a pretty good reader, like when you first get on Zoom or when you first meet a person? Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't say I ever get shocked. I have like a lot of like Scorpio in my chart, so there's not a lot that can come up that like freaks me out.
okay.
But I will say that there are, especially lately, like in the last 2 years,
Hmm.
the energy field collectively has changed a lot. So the things I was taught in school, which is still the foundation of what I use to make sure I stay safe and I stay ethical and the client stays contained and boundaried as well. A lot of what's been showing up in the last 2 years are things that we were never taught, never talked about in school, and it's because the collective field has changed so much. So it feels like that's happening a lot more rapidly, that every week there's things that I've never seen in a field before. I never knew existed, but I would say I stay open and curious, which is the
Mhm.
only way like you'll be able to work with it. Um, but yeah, definitely a lot is changing, and I can talk about some of those things if you like, but also there's things that I don't yet fully understand. I just see things as a lot of rewiring and shifting taking place in different, we talked about those concentric rings in higher vibrational spaces in the energy field. A lot of shifts are being made that go far beyond like a single person life. They feel like they're related to the quantum sort of connection of all things. I just saw The Matrix for the first time like 2 weeks ago, and it's amazing that all this stuff came up before because it's something totally out of a sci-fi movie, which I wouldn't have any context for, which is how I can trust it.
I've never seen that movie. So I need to watch that. So is it like things happening collectively? There's a shift. Is this astrological things? Because I know you dive into astrology and you did a reading, was for October, that was on Spotify that I listened to, and I was like, wow, boom, that's crazy. So kind of talk about, yeah, like what's going on collectively, what's going on within the universe, and how
Yeah.
that might be impacting all of us.
Totally. Well, it's like, how we talked about like the different vibrational layers of a human energy field, like the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. Well, it doesn't stop there. It continues into all these layers that become collective and universal, galactic, etc. So our own human energy fields are usually just responding to the shifts that are taking place on far bigger levels. So the universe as a whole, or at least planet Earth, which I'm most aware of, is moving through this huge shift, especially since the beginning of COVID time. Obviously, that was like a huge thing we were dealing with on like the social, political, health level, but
Mhm.
also I personally, as an energy healer, someone who's primed to feel these things before they happen, had so much, and this might kind of shock or scare people, but I actually was so elated when I felt this shift happening. I felt it in January of 2020, that I first felt the fear, like this huge intense wave of fear in January of 2020. And then when I started to understand what was going on the consciousness base level, I was like so lit up and so excited. And obviously, it's got a lot harder to navigate as we go through.
Right.
Um, but on the energetic level, to me, this signaled such a huge awakening and shift in the quality of energy on Earth. And so when the planet shifts, when the energy around us shifts, then we have to respond to that shift. It's like if we were used to surfing 3 foot waves, and we all got pretty good and stable surfing
Right.
3 foot waves, and then overnight there's a 20-foot surge and we're being asked to stay on our board, ride the wave, and have fun also doing it. And people are like, holy shit, this is too much, this is too big, I
Yeah.
don't have the tools. And that's where I think a lot of people have turned to energy healing lately, because it's the thing that gives us the skills and the tools to navigate these things that otherwise we don't have language for or words for. And
Wow.
so in in short, the shift that's taking place for everybody is that we are being asked to move from what's called like a third dimensional paradigm to a fifth dimensional paradigm, which is essentially a shift from a mentally dominated paradigm, moving through the world with our head, with rationality, with intelligence, wanting to see things linearly, being able to track how things are going to unfold in a predictable way, moving into a fifth dimensional reality, which is heart centered. The heart, if we were to draw it, would move in a spiral, not in a straight line. So when we're like, someone described this once as if you're going through a stairwell, but you can never see more than a foot in front of you. You're just following the wall as you kind of climb the stairs. You know you're shifting, you know you're in a different space, but you can't see it. So when we've been moving to a heart-centered paradigm, maybe people feel this, but there's a lot more sort of like intuitiveness, connections between people, both completely ruptured and severed, but we're meeting people maybe more of like mind or like soul now. There's
Mhm.
an easier way of identifying the people who we feel connected to. Um, and there's both like more social instability in some ways, but also stronger local or like energetic communities forming. And that's a testament to the fact that we're moving through the world more with our heart. It's also becoming harder to use the old paradigm, thinking our way through life now than it was before, because it's just not a viable system anymore. It's almost as if like our computers have all gone through a software update and we're trying to open programs on the old software, and it just, the computer doesn't have the capacity to do that anymore. It's moved on. And so people are having a hard time if they're not finding ways, tools, communities, or support to make that shift, and they're still trying to get through the world in the way that they did 2 years ago and before that. Those people are struggling a lot because it's just not working anymore to be able to try to have a 5-year plan, or to make, concrete decisions based on what you can see tangibly. It's a lot more intuitive, it's a lot more felt sense, and it's a lot more built on faith and trust, because those are the languages of the soul, which centers in the heart.
Wow, I can definitely relate to like the staircase where you can't see. You're just like feeling the wall, hoping there's not like a cliff there that you go down. Wow, that's wild. I mean, I think a lot of people can get on board with what's happening and understand, and you explained that in such a fantastic way. So thank you. What
Yeah.
about like astrology? I know there's been retrogrades and there's like
Mhm.
eclipses and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It
So
feels it feels a little crazy. Like,
it
and
does
you're someone
feel.
who's sensitive, right, to these shifts. Mm-hmm.
And I love that you bring that up because I forgot to talk about that. But essentially, astrology is creating, I call it like a scaffolding or a structure for what's happening on this big sort of level that is really hard to kind of feel and tap into and put language to. Astrology gives us like an alphabet or a structure. I like to look at astrology as like cosmic weather. It can only show us probabilities or predictions about the kind of energy that we're going to experience, but it's up to you to read the weather report and to prepare yourself by bringing like your raincoat or your umbrella. Like no one's going to say tell you to prepare yourself. You have to kind of do that yourself. But astrology creates sort of a language for these shifts that are happening, and so that when things go crazy, cuckoo bananas out in the world, you can look to this structure and say, oh, this was kind of forecasted. It's still challenging, but at least I have a sense and can create some meaning around why it's happening. And through there, choose to also orient ourselves to why it's taking place and the benefits that it's creating societally. But I was listening to an astrology forecast. I always do, but they talk about you have to go into the dark to know the dark before the light comes. And we're in Scorpio season. The sun is in Scorpio, which is the darkest sort of sign. It's no wonder it happens around Halloween time, but Scorpio is the deepest water sign. It's the part of us that wants to get to know the truth. It wants to uncover secrets. It wants to excavate things that have been in the dark. Like Scorpio would be like most related to like a bat cave, probably. You're
My
like, oh, it's
daughter,
freaky, but I know there's something in there that's probably interesting, cool, and I need to bring it to the light. And so when we go into Scorpio season, a lot of people like, no wonder it's timed, like at least in Canada, to like seasonal depression. It's
hibernate. It's time to hibernate. My daughter's a Scorpio, so
yeah,
and everything you're saying, it's right on the money. Yeah.
exactly. And it's a beautiful sign, but when we're not used to that energy, and then the whole collective goes through it at the same time, it can feel like things get really dark. And then right now we're in between eclipses, and eclipses are essentially like supercharged new and full moons. And new and full moons already have sort of like a cadence. There's an initiation or an intention setting at the time of the new moon. We kind of build in the energy as the light of the moon builds. There's a point of culmination or fullness at the time of the full moon, and then we are asked to release something and we cycle back to the new moon. When we're looking at eclipses relate to the nodal axis, which metaphysically in astrology is a point. It's not an object, it's a point mathematically that looks at sort of like our collective societal destinies. So what we're leaving behind as a collective and what we're moving towards. And this is like a soul quality to it. So politics, education, all of the systems still have to respond to this energy that says we're moving away from this collectively, we're moving towards this. So we're having new and full moons along that axis, which just brings with it like a sense of like fatedness or destiny. What unfolds around these times tend to have more of a shift that sticks, more of like permanent changes around these times. And we just had the new moon partial solar eclipse in Scorpio. So we both had to release things because we're in Scorpio, but also the new moon asks us to create new intentions. And then we're going to have a total lunar full moon eclipse in Taurus on November 8th. And that's about moving in the direction of our collective destiny. Taurus rules like our undiluted nature. It's nature. It's the energy of nature, of which like spirit or the divine is easily most accessed through nature. But Taurus is also about like our comfort. It's about the body. It's about the physical in a lot of ways. And we're coming to a full moon. And so at this time, a lot of shit is coming up in people's bodies. A lot of things that have been repressed or held is being excavated by that Scorpio energy. So it's memories people forgot they had. It's connections between events and how they're feeling now that they forgot because they'd been repressed. So things are popping up to the surface now, which is actually a really great thing in the long term, because we talked about at the beginning, it takes so much energy to hold these things in the sub and unconscious minds. So they're coming up because we're healing and they want to be looked at. And all of that condensed energy wants to be freed up for us to use in our life for service, for what we're here to do. But in the short term, it's deeply uncomfortable because, again, it's like we're being asked to surf this crazy high wave. And now we're being thrown all these things from inside our body or our memory or through our relationships. At the time of the full moon on November 8th, it's also the US midterm elections on that day, which I don't think is a coincidence at all.
You know what? That's Isla's birthday is November 8th.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting day, but there's
Yeah.
also all the other planets kind of working around at the same time. And at the time we have Mercury, which is the sign of like our thinking and our thoughts, opposite Neptune in Pisces. Neptune is a spiritual sign, but it can also make things feel really like hazy, foggy, and blurry. So Mercury in Gemini, the way we process information, is having a hard time with Neptune in Pisces at the time of the full moon eclipse, which is already going to be kind of big, which says we're looking for clarity in our thoughts. We're looking for something to feel concrete or for us to know so we can make decisions. And Mercury opposite Neptune is saying it's probably going to feel really hazy, which it's probably going to feel really hard to find clarity, which when we look at the empowerment of astrology is great. Because if I don't expect to feel super clear, then it's okay when I don't. But if I'm trying to move through the world with this idea of something and I'm just so committed to it being that way, I'm going to have a hard time interacting with reality. I'm going to have a hard time when the planets are doing this. I'm affected by them, but I want something to be different. So if I know what's coming, I know how to respond to it, I know how to stay grounded and centered, then exciting things can happen. But if I'm just pushing up against the cosmic weather, like if I'm going outside in a bikini in November in Canada and it's raining, I'm like, I hate this. It's like, well, well, you could have made yourself a little bit more comfortable by just being aware of what's going on. So that's kind of the short of what's coming down the pipeline, and also might provide some clarity for like why people might be having a challenging time right now.
Wow. That's a lot to digest, but such great information. Yeah, I totally get with that US election, and like I don't believe there's any coincidences, right, of when things happen. And wow, what an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Leanna. Where can we find you?
Yeah, right now I'm on Instagram. My handle is at Learn by Light. If you want to follow me on Instagram, and you can send me a DM that says energy. I'd be happy to send people who listen to this a PDF about the upcoming astrology for November in like a short, sort of easy to digest thing to look at, just so people can stay aware, like your own energy astro weather report for the month of November.
Cool.
And people can connect with me there if they like.
Oh, that would be so awesome. Okay, so DM her with energy. She'll send you that blueprint and we'll put her handle and all the info in the comments for this video. Thank you so much, Leanna. This was awesome, like so enlightening, so interesting, and just very powerful. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Holly, for facilitating and for having me. This was really fun.